I call this meeting of the Finance and Facilities Committee of the Waukesha Board of Education to order. First up is verification the meeting was properly posted.
Yes, it was.
Excellent, thank you very much. Second up is opportunity for public comment. Is there anybody that wishes to address the committee? Seeing none, moving on to our action items. First action item is approval of minutes from December 7th, 2020 meeting. Looking for a motion. Mrs. Voigt.
I move to approve the minutes as presented in our board docs.
Excellent, thank you very much. Second? Thank you, Mrs. Ryanchek. Any discussion on the minutes? Mr. Como.
Just one quick suggestion, where it says meeting called to order at 5:35. I think we should say that was called to order by you.
Oh, okay, great. So do we have-
Tiny change.
Yeah, okay. Excellent. Anything else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Moving on to the approval. Vouchers.
We have a couple of questions this month. So voucher number 338410, check made to petty cash for $546.30. The question was that a component of that petty cash transaction seemed high at $175.75. So was just asked to provide a quick update on how petty cash is handled. So the schools each site is given a small allotment of petty cash, usually about $100, anywhere from $100 to $200, depending on what level of elementary or secondary. And then there's some departments in Lindholm that get some petty cash, and then in the business office, we keep a larger petty cash box in our safe. And the schools reimburse teachers and employees for small purchases. The limit should be $25. That there's no, that they don't reimburse through petty cash for anything more than $25. And then in turn, when they run low on their petty cash, they return the receipts to Lindholm in the business office, and we reimburse them in cash for the receipts that they brought to us so that they balance back out. And then when we start to get low in our petty cash box, we submit all of those receipts through our accounts payable where we write these petty cash checks, and then we take those to the bank and we cash them, and we get cash to replenish our petty cash box. We do a monthly reconciliation on this to make sure that everything's in balance as far as how much money goes through AP and how much money is put back into the cash box. And then in this case where it showed one disbursement for $175, that was actually one site that had 9 different small transactions that all happened to be going to the same account number, so it bundled up to the $175.
Mr. Como.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sherry. I'm glad to hear that wasn't one transaction, because that would be too much for one transaction from a petty cash perspective, at least in my opinion. So.
Also, just for full disclosure, we do, in the business office, write checks out of the petty cash account, and we do have some higher transactions that come through there because we reimburse parents that are involved in these early college credit programs. We have to reimburse them for their textbooks, and we do this through petty cash versus our regular AP because these are generally one-time disbursements, and if we had to keep adding these people as vendors into our Skyward accounting system, that would be a lot of vendors that are just one-time use vendors. And so we choose to put those through petty cash, but those are checks that are written directly to the parent, not written to us and giving them cash. So
Right.
we give a check to the parent out of our petty cash checking account.
Sure.
Not the cash involvement with the parents, but those are higher transactions. So there are some higher transactions that come through petty cash, but not in this mechanism that I've laid out here.
Gotcha. Thank you. I appreciate you reviewing the process, and I'm sure that our auditors would bring it to our attention if it was an issue, and
Hope so.
because I do know those things are looked at also. So thank you for reminding me of our procedures.
Problem. The next question was on voucher 338701. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but Houck Transit Advertising. And the question was, it was for a payment of $5,886, and was this for the advertising for 4K enrollment. And yes, this is the bus advertising for 4K enrollment. And I had to quick run home before this meeting, and I happened to be behind a bus that had one, so I see them out there. We started this we had some ads during the summer, and then this last round of ads. But to date for this, since we started this program, we spent $11,076. This last round for $5,800. I checked in with Mary Jo King, and she thought it was 12 to 14 buses for 6 to 8 weeks, but she was going to get me that information as soon as she could. But that's about what we're getting for the money. And then I called Enrollment to see how are we going to see if this is successful. And because I figured I knew one of you would ask that. And they indicated that when they send out the site information, site selection information to the parents, they're going to be asking the question, how did you hear about our 4K program? So that they can evaluate if this was worth the money spending on this program. Questions on that? Go on to the next one. The next question was more of a general question involving several vouchers, totaling $5,844.59. And it was asking about employee recognition, and that all of these vouchers were for employee recognition for retirees, and they wanted confirmation of that. And yes, it was retiree recognition. So I wanted to just outline what goes into that. And when the retirees have 3 options to choose from as a gift this year. One was a $100 donation to WEF in lieu of getting a gift for themselves, and that's what the $300 to WEF was for. $100 gift card to Tofty's Table, and that's what the majority of that money was for. And then the other option was a watch from Sullivan Jewelers, so that was the Sullivan Jewelers part of it. But because this year they couldn't have their in-person dinner, they did a little different thing, that in lieu of having a big banquet, they were also offered a $75 gift card to one of several restaurants. And I listed down here what the restaurants were and how many were selected, but I don't think you all want me to sit and read through all those. So
Restaurants might want you to read off their names.
that's true. Hadn't thought about that. Free advertising. And so that's what there were a few more that aren't listed in the question, but they're all listed down below. Any questions on this?
No, thank you very much, because I was just wondering if we had the opportunity to recognize the retirees, because that normally would happen earlier in the year, back in spring, and this being a December item. I was just wondering if that was the reason for that amount.
Absolutely was.
Thank you.
That concludes the questions on the vouchers.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll be looking for a motion for approval of the vouchers.
I'll move to approve the vouchers as presented.
Frontier, is there a second?
I
Mrs.
second
Boyd
it.
seconds. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? 5-0. Thank you very much. That concludes our action items for the evening. Next up is discussion information items, and the first one is open enrollment seat availability for 2021-2022.
Every year, well, going back a few years ago, the request was made. This used to come right to the board, and then it was asked that a committee review it. So this is F&F's task, and Dr. Cook's here to walk us through the plan for open enrollment for the following school year.
So every year in January, the board does have to approve the number of seats. This process, what you have proposed in front of you right now is our best guess as to where we will be at the beginning of next school year. You can see in the first table that we have from K4 through grade 12 listed, and then the number of seats available by grade level. We do our best to take a look at the number of sections that we have, plus our projected enrollment, and we try to fill classes across the district. We're not in a position where we're trying to add teachers. In years past, the question has come up with, looking at second grade there, we have 68 monolingual seats that are open. Why don't we reduce a teacher, given that we have about 30 sections at second grade in the district? it's not enough kids across the district to reduce a section and a teacher. If we had fewer elementary schools, then perhaps we would look at this a little bit differently. I know we would, but we just don't have the ability to reduce because we have so many sections at each grade level. Next to that, you can see our projected dual language open seats. At any grade level in the district where we have, where you see 0 seats listed, we create a waiting list, and those students are automatically offered a placement in eAchieve. Because eAchieve has unlimited space, you can see that in the next category. If you scroll down, or I'm sorry, flip your page over, it depends if you're looking at this electronically or not. In special education, we are declaring 0 seats available, and that's based off of the number of students who currently are receiving special ed services in the district, divided over the number of teachers, and then a recommended caseload. We do exceed our current caseload recommendations across the district. We find that we are, able to educate, but if we took more students through open enrollment, we would be taxing the teachers and the aides that we have in place. Further, and I'm sorry I didn't mention this before, back on the first page, Butler Middle School has been declared closed due to space. It's been that way for a number of years. Even though we've done the renovation work at Butler, and we've added some classroom space, that classroom space has been helpful and will be helpful in serving the kids who live in that attendance area. To add more kids there, we put the same problem back on the school that we've had in years past. In years past, we also had Whittier listed as being closed to space, and we've taken that off. Whittier has about 700 kids that live in the attendance area, but their enrollment this year is something like 120. So many kids already choice out of that area. We figured we could allow students to go to school at Whittier, so should they choose. We list that the STEM Academy and Montessori are drawn through lottery, and we also have a 4K lottery for placement. So I'm here for questions if you have any.
Any questions? I have a question. What's the wait list look like at STEM?
There has not been a long waiting list at STEM in recent years. 5, 6, 7 years ago, we had waiting lists at grades, but we've been able to accommodate the requests.
That's what I thought. Thank you. Anything else? Mr. Como?
And just real quick, Joe, this is a report we have to submit to the state or to DPI? That's the purpose of it?
The board has to approve it. That's the law in January. So all we have to do is approve it so that we have it on record. We have the option of going in and, loading it into the state as to where we're at. I believe our office has done that. I'd have to double check. But the seats have to be declared. And so they would go back, if there was ever a challenge on open enrollment denial, they would look first, does the board approve it in January? And if they did, what did they approve? And if we were within the scope of our limits, then we would be in a good spot. Because we have eAchieve as an offering to families, we're generally in a pretty good position when it comes down to any appeals, because we offer a placement in the district. You can't open enroll to a school. You can open enroll to the district, and then the district has the ability to place you.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
You are welcome. Have a good night.
I emailed everyone, but just so this actually shows up on the board agenda under FNF as an action item, even though we didn't take action. So a little strange. I don't know how we came to that, but we did. So just be aware of that when you see the agenda for the board.
Thank you. Alrighty, next up on discussing information items is referendum project update.
Kate Egan from Bray is here, and Kurt Wiebelhaus from Building Solutions, right? I always call him Kurt. I never think about the company he works for. To update you on where we're at. So we have a slide deck that will walk you through.
Don't make me talk to that one, Darren.
You're not an open enrollment specialist as well?
Nope, that's the book.
So we've done a very similar model or presentation that we've done in the past we'll do to you. I also put, and we have it all in board docs as well, but I accidentally ran these copies of the balance sheet, the financial balance sheet, so I gave it to you anyways. But again, Jess has it all in board docs if you want to review it later. So Kate will walk you through, and we're here to answer any questions. I guess the biggest thing that's unique to this presentation is we are ramping up to send out the bid documents on the work at Whittier, Hawthorne, and Hillcrest. So, Kate,
Thank you. It's good to see you all tonight. It's especially exciting as what we've been calling kind of phase 3 of work for the remaining elementary schools with regards to the safety and security renovations. So as Darren said, we'll provide a high-level agenda, high-level schedule for you. I'll go through the layouts for the 3 schools that Darren listed. Kurt can give a budget update, and then we're happy to answer any questions that you have tonight. So looking at the schedule, again, we've been calling this phase 3. First phase was 11 secure entries that were designed and constructed in 2018, pardon me. And then phase 2 was the middle school and South High School. And so you can see we are, it's a little small for me, but we're in probably 3/4 of the way through. So it was exciting to hit significant milestones in December with the completion of both Les Paul and Butler additions. And so renovations continue in those 3 schools, the 3 middle schools still. And we're excited to present the layout for the 3 in phase 3. So as Darren said, we've been looking at these as we have for all the buildings in the district. The reason that these 3 are at this point in time is they also had some accessibility needs. And so we are doing our best to address those in these solutions as well. So we had schematic plans for these throughout the entire process. For Hawthorne, a piece of the small addition, as I'll go through, is not only an addition for the secure entry, but also an elevator. So that will get a majority of that building to be accessible at the multiple levels. It's a 2-sided 3-stop elevator because that building, as many in the district, are split level, as many homes are. And so that solution will allow that accessibility for that as well.
so actually at Hawthorne, is there 5 levels within Hawthorne?
Yeah.
So all of those levels will be accessible except for, is it 2
There's
4K
two
rooms, right,
4K
at the end?
classrooms at the end.
There's only like 3 steps, and you really can't, 3 steps and you're facing a wall at the, so a huge leap for Hawthorne.
So the other part of that is not only the elevator, but also a kind of platform lift. If you've been in that building recently, when you come in the main entrance, you're greeted by a landing and a couple stairs up and a couple stairs down. Due to existing building conditions, the best solution we have is to install a lift that would allow a wheelchair to be put on a lift and brought up and down that stair. It would accommodate assistance, and it would be tucked up and folded to be out of the line of traffic during the school day, and so a student on that would be assisted. But that allows us to get access to that primary wing, other than, as Darren said, those 2 classrooms. So that's a majority of the building. As he also said, we are nearing the end of construction documents, so we are planning to issue those next Thursday, and we are going to the Plan Commission meeting on January 27th. And then that construction would take place starting in April. The addition at Hawthorne would start, and then the renovations once school is out for the remaining projects.
And then on the right there's a summary of the funding for Hawthorne. If you go back, the district approved $1 million to go towards the Hawthorne renovation. $250,000 of that's in the current budget, and then whatever the final number ends up being, roughly $750,000, will be taken out of fund balance to finish those costs to match up with the costs of construction. And that's why we split it up that way.
So this is a rendering of Hawthorne Elementary School. So as I said, it's an office addition plus an elevator addition coming off to the north. With a canopy, we'll say main office. There's some existing signage on the building, so we really want to clarify where the main office of this building is. A little bit of landscape work just based on the grade change. And we're also replacing one of the stairs that goes up to Maitland. So we'll be new handrails and replace that concrete steps.
Does everyone know where this is on the building? It's next to, or the left of the flag is the existing front entrance to Hawthorne on the corner.
So the orange shadow is the addition, and the gray tone is the increased pavement. And so a couple of trees need to be removed in this area. But other than that, replacing and tying into the existing site as much as possible. We're also replacing the flagpole as part of the scope for this. So looking a little bit closer, on the right is an elevation from Maitland, as I said. There will be 2 canopies, the larger canopy at the main entrance, and then a small canopy to the north that allows for egress out of the building. The secure entrance allows visibility to visitors coming and going, as well as behind to that elevator hallway. This office includes a health room. There's 2 accessible toilet rooms being added to the plan, as well as the principal's office. So that's at this level. As I said, with that elevator, we need to tie into the 2 other levels of the building. So at the lowest level, we're tying into the library. And at the upper level, it's a classroom currently. It'll be designated a resource space. And as part of the renovations, the existing office, there's a couple of smaller spaces that make up that office and some resource spaces. We're going to open that up to be a large classroom. So that'll be the same size classroom as many of the others are, to really offset that, which is needed here. Are there any questions kind of about the scope and plan of that? Otherwise, here's a couple of renderings and kind of color palettes. We're using very similar finishes to the first phase of secure entries, which is, again, very similar to what was done in the middle schools and South High School. So really is a district standard. You walk into a main office at one of the schools, it'll feel familiar to the other schools, but each one is special and different. Each one is a little bit different. We tried to use the colors of the school in the existing, kind of site-specific circumstances. So it's not cookie cutter, but it's definitely standard, especially looking at paint colors, standardizing the carpet, the door frame, accent colors as makes sense, and then the reception desks.
One of the things that we've improved upon from a security perspective is line of sight from the office. Mm-hmm. How is that working out for this location?
So this should work out really well. We also provided quite a few windows in this space. So anyone approaching this office, the receptionist has view not only to those approaching the door, but anyone who be parked up. This has some grade change, as you recall. Anyone parking along that way, there'll be a window out to see anyone on that street. We also provided a window behind to that elevator hallway. So if somebody is in that way, they can turn around to see that. And then there's doors into the hallway, and that's where anyone, like a student or staff, would come into the office from that door. And so there's windows to allow visibility for that as well. The receptionist also has eyes of sight into the health room. So I know that coverage is sometimes important. And so it has views pretty much into the principal's office, the health room. This is a view from waiting back to reception. So quite a bit of visibility from this scenario.
That's good. That's good. It seems like a simple thing, right? Mm-hmm. Commonsensical thing, but I'm sure you put an extraordinary amount of effort into making sure that part of the design comes through here. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So at Hillcrest Elementary, we are moving the office from where it currently is back to where we think it was originally, as well as adding a canopy to designate that main office area. We're restoring some of the exterior windows to be larger to give that visibility, as we just discussed, out to the parking lot and to anyone kind of approaching the building. So this is a rendering. We're going to be doing 3 new columns to match the existing masonry, and then replacing that, the front doors. So we're creating a vestibule at this location as well. So there's 2 portions of work. On the left, it shows where the office will be with that new vestibule. It'll also include a health room, the principal's office, and we have 2 accessible toilet rooms. One a little bit more generous that will have space for a changing table and a lift to accommodate students with special needs. And then the second plan shows how the main office will be renovated into a staff workroom. And there's some other additional resource spaces that are basically flipping in this concept. So a little bit of work to accommodate that. So here's a rendering of that area. They have 2 workstations at this school, and we separated those given current times. We originally had it kind of as an L, and those stations worked together. So we adjusted that to separate them a little bit. And again, similar design concepts as the other schools have. Another angle of that workroom behind. And then this is the view looking back at the doors for some of that visibility. Any questions from Hillcrest? Oops, and I apologize, this says Hawthorne, this is Hillcrest. And then Whittier Elementary School, so we are looking at enclosing there isn't a current vestibule at this school, so there's an existing overhang. So we are infilling that overhang a little bit similar to what we did at Prairie with replacing the front of it. So 1/3 will become kind of waiting space for the new office, which will be in what was a early childhood classroom directly adjacent to it. And then 2/3 will be a vestibule. And we are looking at doing a ramp and a stair here, but then looking at the full site, noticed that there are stairs to get up to this portion of the site. And so we extended scope all the way to the sidewalk and are making it a much more gradual approach. And right next to the building is a little bit steeper that does require a handrail, but there aren't any stairs any longer to go from the sidewalk up to the building, making this accessible. This is another split-level school, so we are again installing one of the platform lifts to get you from this level up to the next intermediate level that has the cafeteria, which is also the gymnasium and the library. Here's a plan of that. And again, a health room with an accessible toilet room is included in the scope. You can see a couple of pairs of doors too. I did point out compartmentalization doors we're showing too to show that. And here are the office renderings. And they also will have quite a bit of visibility out to East Avenue and anyone approaching from the site. This is my elementary school, Whittier Wildcat. Turn it over to Kurt.
All right, so the last major financial milestone of all the projects is with the bidding of the Hawthorne, Hillcrest, and Whittier. So as Findorf has done all along, leading up to the bid documents complete, they budget based on historical costs of what's the cost going to be for Hawthorne, Hillcrest, and Whittier. That helps inform the design to be modified as needed to hit the budget. So mid-February we should know, we should have those bids back for those projects. Overall, on the last update that we provided was the September board meeting. We provided an update. Our numbers really haven't changed much from then to now. The overall, if you want to go to the first slide there, overall expenses slightly went up. Around 100,000, and we had an offsetting income source of focus on energy rebates. That as part of these projects, we're designing to be above and beyond what code is with the energy efficiency standpoint. So focus on energy provides some incentives back to us, so we're able to reinvest those incentives back into the project. So expenses. The next slide shows the revenue sources. We have that focus on energy rebate in there, the $104,000, and so the revenue went up to offset the expenses. So the overall picture for the project, we're showing 82,000 over. So essentially for a project that's $66 million, we're on budget. Same numbers that we showed last time. We're expecting that 82,000 is going to come from leftover contingency or ideally favorable bidding that's coming up with the Hawthorne, Hillcrest, and Whittier projects. So overall, we're looking good. Contingency, we show up there on that first note, the owner contingency. We have a little over 300,000 left there yet. And then the second note just references the budgets that we're using from the Hawthorne, Hillcrest, and Whittier was based on the 75% construction documents that are near 100% now and be ready to go out to bid.
Any questions on the financials? And again, there's a lot of detail here. There's a cover sheet to the balance sheet with more specific backup there. And we've also, Kurt included the reports we've given you in March, June, and September, and we go back beyond that, but I wanted to keep it in one piece so you can see how things have changed or pretty much stayed the same for quite a while now. So overall, pretty good position when you're considering we're going into 60, 70, 100-year-old buildings to be as close to budget as we are, I think.
Montiel.
Thank you. I was just going to say, with a budget of 66.6 or 66.5 million, I've never seen a project of that size come in within 0.1% of the estimate. So, yeah, great job.
You would think results like this would make it on the radio or something, but no, for a government job, but we won't.
Good. Thank you.
Anything else?
And then, Jess, we have this in board docs too, right? This one-page summary. This is just a sheet that we sent out to parents and staff that by building, I guess we clumped the 3 elementaries. So just the work that has yet to be completed. Now, some of this is already done, the cafeteria at Les Paul, for example. We have it listed will be done, but it's a one-page summary. So if you do run into someone who has a question or something, we have this document to share, and it's been translated as well, so. And of course, we have the summaries that I've been sending out in the Friday updates. They're on the website too, fully translated too, for anyone who wants to hear of the latest work that's being completed. So that's our report. We're here to answer any questions. Obviously, the bid results will come back in March, because in February we won't have the bid results yet, so we won't have much to talk about. But we should be able to come back in March with a pretty close to final budget scenario for you to review.
Mr. Como.
Just real quick, I really do appreciate, this kind of summary in a nice, neat format. So when I do have someone who asks a question, I can point them to it or send it off to them, to him or her. The communication has been extremely effective as far as my opinion. And I know there's a lot of hard work that goes into that. This seems like maybe it's just simple stuff, but it really is important information, and how we communicate it, because this is the taxpayers' money. This is what they agreed to, and we want to make sure that we follow through with what they voted on. And this is one of our ways of keeping them up to speed. And all this information, too, is out on our website, correct, Darren?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So this is kept up to speed fairly quickly. I mean, when
Those
information
weekly
changes.
updates go out, they're there, if not, they're going out within 2 or 3 days of the end of the week. So as soon as we get it, we're turning it around with full translation, so.
I just wanted to say I appreciate the communication efforts on keeping our constituents informed on this.
Mrs. Voigt.
I have to share that I was just able to actually see the Les Paul cafeteria before this meeting, and it's amazing. The little pictures that we see on the updates are one thing, but to be there and see the cloud lighting and just the design shape and to understand the thematic of it, it's just very, very well done.
Thank you.
They've been there for 4 days, so
exciting to hear
they're on
that.
schedule for January.
Actually, Diane and Dr. Siebert and I were just at a meeting, and I was leaving, and I said, I have to take this picture. So here's what that cafeteria looks like at night. It's really just, from what the building was, and it was a fine building before that served us for a long time, but it's really a neat space, or spaces. I didn't capture the offices part of it, but I just thought I'd share that since I had it on my phone. That's all we have.
Ms. Voigt?
We're anxious to see the history wall. I think you're involved in that planning as well.
Yes. Yep.
But we were looking at where that little area will be.
Yes. We're still collecting some of the information for it. Our environmental branding team is working on it, so we'll be excited to share.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kurt. I'll just do a little opening statement and then I'll turn it over to you.
Alrighty. Next up is the 2021-2022 long-range budget forecast.
Yeah, Sherry's going to walk you through, we have the Baird model done and a projection to share, and but I just wanted to have a few opening statements. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of federal dollars that we think we are getting. We have some federal dollars we hope that we're getting, but I haven't gotten any letters confirming any of that. So we tried to factor that in, but we've developed a budget projection based on the belief that we're coming back to 5-day instruction in fall, because we have to build around something, right? And none of us know what our situation is going to be leading up to that time, but I just want you to know that at some point we may need to make a call, if nothing else. Teacher contracts go out May 1st, so we have to make some sort of assumptions heading into fall, because with our current model of instruction with eAchieve, virtual, and face-to-face, it's not the most efficient model, and we've not, and maybe I have at some point, we've not talked costs this year at all. It was survival this year, so, but at some point we have to, take some time and reflect on where we are. So that's an important point. Add on to that, the state budget cycle. We don't know what the state budget says. We don't know what their budget is to know what our budget might look like. So we've made some pretty, I think, optimistic assumptions in that. We actually are projecting $150 more per kid, whether that's revenue limit or per pupil aid. I think very few districts are out there doing that, but the state's budget, from what I'm hearing, is not as bad as what we thought, certainly last spring. So we have that going for us. But one thing with the budget outlook and the sources of our revenue that we'll be likely using to make it work, it's one-time federal dollars. And I have on my executive summary, most important in a larger font for a purpose. It's like the grant you get and you add a service that you never had before, and the grant goes away. It's kind of the same thing. This is setting us up. I think it'll buy us time. I think it'll give all of us to find out where we are instructionally in terms of our program and all of that. And Dr. Siebert will become more familiar with what we're doing and actually hopefully be out in the schools more as COVID hopefully dies down. But we have a lot to learn over the next period. But we are looking at some level of reductions because if nothing else, we have to go through and identify our COVID-related costs that hopefully we don't need heading into next year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sherry to go through the specifics of what we're seeing.
Well, and I'll just say the only thing I'm absolutely certain about on this is that it will change for October. So there's so many moving parts right at the moment that this is our gut feel on where we think things will end up. And it's not a real pretty picture right now, even though we are being optimistic about things. If we first take a look at the Baird chart, the colored one, I think the biggest thing to point out right now is the budget we have in there, we're currently showing a deficit of over $4 million, $4,735,655. I'm sorry, I said that wrong, but you get the idea, 4.7 million. And that's a pretty large figure to think about having to take from your fund balance. And so on the other chart, I have a little bit more detail, not the prettiest picture, and I apologize for that, but in looking, excuse me, I'm looking at our overall revenue totals. We're anticipating a drop of 1.5 million in revenue. Now, part of that is because of the current CARES Act was a one-time thing of $1.2 million. We'll get into some additional funding possibilities as we move on in this. But one thing I want to point out between our local and state, with the Baird model, they had a pretty pessimistic view of what our equalization aid was going to look like. So I didn't get into too much detail saying how much of this in the local. The local's looking a little high because it's showing a higher tax levy right now. We didn't want to get into that detail because that's just not useful information right now, because that is going to change. So the overall revenue is where we think it's going to come, but between the local and state dollars, it'll fluctuate. So to kind of go into some of the assumptions there on the interdistrict, we had a slight increase to open enrollment, but we're assuming that the students are going to go down as things level off and we go back into the classes. We're assuming that our open enrollment's going to, I think it's going to still stay high. I think people are going to stick with eAchieve, but not as high as it was this year. This year was really a tremendous amount of open enrollment into eAchieve. But then the transfer rate's going to increase, so we assumed that, and that brings us down a slight bit in the interdistrict. In the state, the computer aid and personal property aid were held to the same amounts that we had this year. The per pupil aid, we estimated to increase by $75, and this is where Darren mentioned we're anticipating a $150 increase. We put 75 of that into the revenue limit side of things, and $75 into the revenue limit side, and $75 into the per pupil aid. It could come out in one or the other. It just depends on how the state wants to handle that. For the federal, we did not budget for additional COVID relief, but I'll speak to that in just a minute. And then our other revenues held. So overall, a drop of 1.5 million in revenues. So there's a note down here about additional revenue considerations. These are some of the things that are in the pool. They're being talked about. We're expecting things, but we don't know where they're going to fall. Some could come in this year. Some could come in next year. But I'm going to go through that list because that paints an entirely different picture if we get to add this money in. The biggest unknown in this list is FEMA. We've applied for currently $794,000 in FEMA relief. That's for cleaning supplies, PPEs, plexiglass, all of those things. But FEMA's timeline is pretty unknown at this point. We do know that right now we've passed the initial stage of review and we're into a more detailed stage of review with them. But they're not forthcoming, and there's not like, it takes 6 weeks to do this and 4 weeks to do this. We have no idea if they're going to approve our claim or when they're going to approve our claim. But we have claimed that much, plus we put in an additional budget for an additional $230,000 with FEMA. So that's about $1 million that's potential, but we don't know. Unemployment costs that we expect to recover are $936,000, but the timing on that is very unclear, and we just reached back out to Workforce Development last week, and they confirmed, yep, you should be getting this money back, but we have no idea when it will be. They're just in a state of trying to get through everything, getting people paid still. So 50% of that is coming from the state and 50% is coming from the federal government, but would be funneled through the state to get to us. So again, we're pretty sure we're getting that back as it stands, but we don't know if it'll come in this fiscal year or next fiscal year. And then now the new relief package that was signed in December looks like we could get 4.2 million in additional COVID funds, which is a pretty substantial amount of money. This is assuming that it's going to be handled the same way as the original funding, and that was to go through the Title I funding model. And from what I understand, it doesn't include an allocation for private schools this time around, so the money would be all for the district. So we're just going to wait and see and make sure that's truly how it falls out. There's also additional GEARS money. We were not given any of the Gears money this first round, and I don't expect that we would get any in the second round either. That money the governor targeted for schools that really, originally, this for schools that had lower test scores and were really lagging in technology. So it's apparently a good thing for us that we are so advanced in technology and have good test scores. Not a good thing financially, but overall a good thing for the district. So if all of those pools come in, that's an additional $6.1 million worth of revenue that more than makes up that deficit that we had. Any questions so far on the revenue side or questions on these unknowns?
Mr. Montiel?
Thank you. Excuse me. Do we know if those potential COVID funds are going to be restricted as within the district?
We don't know that yet.
Okay.
There's been no guidance at all. That just pretty much came out toward the end of the year, and nothing has been set yet. I'm assuming there's going to be, the original ones had some pretty broad strokes as far as guidance, but definitely tied to COVID expenditures.
Okay, thank you.
That's one of the big questions that's out there is, especially with Fema now being a player, now whether they're an active player in the end, I don't know. We don't need $6 million of face masks and plexiglass. If this $4.2 million is not allowed, and I'm willing to get somewhat creative with these things, but if they don't allow us to use this for budget stabilization, it doesn't help with the $4.7 million if the rules are that. I'm hoping that they see the light on that, but kind of the domino effect, and I just want to touch on the timing. I don't want to interrupt too long here, Sherry, so I apologize. We're waiting on the CARES to claim the CARES dollars to find out what goes to FEMA, because I can't claim the same expenditure twice. So that's really a linchpin for us to start understanding the cash flow of this, because all this might hit by the end of this fiscal year, or next. So I'm just going to tell the committee that we might have a great fiscal year again this year because of the timing of these payments. But like we talked about last spring, those surplus dollars will actually be used in the following 2 school years to provide stability, hopefully, financially. So it's really an interesting situation where we think we have a lot, but I'm not sure of the timing, or if a couple of them, maybe even 3 of them are even real, so, or will come to fruition, so.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, so when you say budget stabilization, what do you mean by that? So, for example, this year we've had to hire people we've never had to hire before to help us with COVID in general. I'll just make a broad statement. We've had other expenses like the PPE and things like that. So when you say budget stabilization, see, right now, we're paying for that out of our own pockets right now. We haven't gotten anything reimbursed. We're thinking we could have up to $6 million reimbursed, but it could be 0 too. We just don't know. So when you say budget stabilization, just like you had said, just kind of explain to me what you mean by that.
Now, if the money comes to you and it says anything that COVID caused a negative position on, you can use these dollars to offset that. Perfect example on if they say it's only for PPE and tracers and maybe a nurse and those types of things, that really kind of bottlenecks you. You're in a tight column of where you can spend those dollars. But we also had COVID impact, I would argue, our summer school program enrollment. And again, our funding is all tied to enrollment. Went down 2/3, I forget the exact number, Sherry. We had kids who, in 4K, it'll be hard to identify, who never came to us. Now, if they take that broader definition, to me, it's a loss of funding that they're making up for, and those dollars that they're making up for general use or general revenue sources. So my guess is, or my hope is that there is a looser application to there, because it gets into, I could argue this all the way to Madison. The state's economy shut down. Their ability to fund us was affected by COVID. I'm willing to go that far, but if they don't look at it with that broader sense, and they really tie us to things that I've already gotten maybe money from FEMA for, and CARES number one, and we're just kind of repeating the same eligible costs. I don't see, it won't be as helpful as $4.2 million in my mind. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps, yes.
Wait,
The CARES dollars are not listed here. I'm assuming that those were all last budget.
The original CARES Act was 1.2 mil, about close to 1.2 million. That is included in the 2020-21 budget. And so when we look at the drop of federal funding that I have in there, that does include, that drop is mainly the CARES Act not being included in 21-22. And we get it. We don't know, is it going to, with the original CARES Act, when it came out, they allowed us to go back to March, the initial point of the start of the pandemic, to claim past expenditures. We don't know when the new money hits, is it going to be moving forward, or are we still able to go back and recoup money from? And what Darren said, the whole FEMA thing throws a little bit of a wrench in this, because we have to report by February 3rd how we're using our CARES money. Right now, we're not sure what's going to FEMA. We know what we've submitted to FEMA, but we don't know, are we going to be scrambling at the last minute to throw that back into CARES now because FEMA didn't cover it?
Yeah, and it's not like FEMA's a regular entity that's writing checks to schools. I've never worked with FEMA in 25 years of doing this. So it's not a known entity where you know, oh yeah, I filed a claim and with 4 weeks I'll get some sort of response. My fear is this is a 6-month, 8-step process. So accounting-wise, we're going to have to make some calls because we're trying to maximize our claims, to push these dollars as far as we can. But we'll figure that part out,
And the original CARES money, we have until September of 2022 to spend it. That original funding has a very broad time frame. Generally, when you get this type of money, it's one fiscal year and it's one and done. This one spans into, have a fair amount of time to, it would be nice to hold back some of those Oh, I'm sorry. It would be nicer to hold back some of that CARES money if we could to offset costs for next year instead. But we'll wait and see, and
yeah, and that's one other thing we hope for with the 4.2 million with the first CARES, or CARES number one. They gave us essentially 2 years to utilize the dollars. I hope they give us that kind of window so it crosses 2, maybe 3 of our fiscal years, so maybe we can use some of those dollars to kind of, if the rules allow and all that, to help us react to whatever's coming.
And I'll get into more of the projection for the future years after we get through the expenditures. If there's no more questions on revenues, I'll just jump right into the expenditures. So for our salary expenditures, we did make a budget assumption of a 2.4% increase, which is kind of our standard, plus an increase in summer school, not the amount the person's going to be paid for summer school, but the amount of staffing that we'll need again for summer school compared to this year, because it was cut down quite a bit. So if we're comparing this year's budget to next, we had to increase that amount in there. Benefits, mainly health insurance, looking at a potential increase for the health insurance. We'll talk a little bit more about health insurance in my monthly budget update. Purchase services, removed from there was money for the Hawthorne construction that was in this year's budget. But then again, we added back in the first student rate increase and an open enrollment out increase just due to the transfer rate. Knocking capital, we've already anticipated an overall site budget reduction of $100,000. Just in looking at the budget picture we currently have, that's what we gave to the sites currently. No special project funds. Generally, every year we have an additional $3,500 they can apply for special site projects. We do not have that budgeted. And then we remove plexiglass from this budget because we probably have all the partitions we will need for life. So that's why there's a decrease of $336,000 in the non-capitals. Capital objects pretty much remaining constant. And then insurance, That includes the unemployment compensation drop because we're not seeing, people are back at work, we're not paying the claims that we had. And then the next page shows our transfers, and the transfer decrease is due to our sped money. Our aid estimate is a little bit higher, so we're expecting to have a little more money there. We will in March pay off our energy efficiency debt, and so we will not have to do a transfer to Fund 38 for savings. And then we don't have budgeted in this budget a transfer to Fund 46 yet. That's something we generally wait and see at the end of the year how we're doing, and then ask to have that put into the next budget. So overall, our expenditures are looking to increase by $1.7 million, which is causing the 4.7 deficit. But the bottom line just says if we get all that money that we think is going to be thrown our way, if it all happens to come into next year and has to be used by next year, then we're looking at a surplus. So it's quite a broad picture we're painting with. We could have a surplus of 1.4, or we could have a deficit of 4.7. I'm sure that's what you like to hear, those wide ranges like that, but
I think we
it just
covered
goes to
ourselves with that
That's
range,
right,
didn't we?
that's right. We pulled out the dartboard and just started throwing darts, and that's where we came up with. No, it just shows, it really just goes to show the uncertainty we're living under right now, and there's just too many moving parts to get closer at this point. But every month, we'll hone it in as much as we can and come back with more accurate information. And then if we go back to the colored page, I'd like to talk about the 4 columns on the right, which are the current model scenario. So what this does is it says, well, based on what your current budget is and the things that we want to put in as assumptions that carry forward over the next 4 years, this starts to paint a pretty depressing picture when you look at, if you draw your attention to the surplus deficit, the big red numbers along the bottom, showing that if we don't make changes, our deficit is going to just increase from year to year. Because all this money that we're talking about with this 6.1, that's a one-time thing. None of those are things that we would expect to continue on over the next 4 years to help offset the budget. They might help us in 1 year, and if we end up with surpluses, we certainly want to put that into fund balance to help offset the picture we're painting for the next couple of years. So not to be the person of doom and gloom, but it is really critical that we start to look at where can we start trimming things, because the enrollment, we're anticipating, this budget really, I think, has a pretty, compared to the declining enrollment that we've been experiencing, this is a pretty modest decline in enrollment that we have forecasted out. So we're hoping that the declining enrollment starts to level off a little bit so that the picture doesn't even look worse.
I think our best case scenario is flat revenue. If we can maintain, and this isn't flat revenue, if we could maintain flat revenue, I think it'd be better. But also keep in mind, and I'm not one of these people who rolls out a big scary number so we can get on the front page of the paper. There's 2 state biennial budgets in here, or 2.5 state biennial budgets in here. It's us returning back to a more cost-efficient approach to instructional model, right? So it is scary. And I think the biggest fear, because after seeing the federal dollars that we might be eligible for and hope to get, I'm not as scared about 01 or 21, 22 anymore. It's when that one-time money, you can see you jump from 4.7 to $10.8 million, and that's essentially the federal money is a big part of that gap. And again, this assumes we do nothing, which is never the case. There's always right sizing. As if our enrollment continues to drop, we will continue to address that in staffing and facilities and all the other things that are related to that. But it's the tread line in our, I mean, just insurance, health insurance alone, we budget annually a 5% increase. That's $1 million of new costs, and we have revenues that are likely decreasing. Staff prefer to have raises, those types of things. We have built-in kind of inflationary factors that we're fighting while our revenues are more than likely rolling backwards, even in a fairly optimistic financial or revenue projection, or assumption.
So each year we have to balance our budget, and I really appreciate all the hard work that this administration puts in year after year to do that. And some of those decisions have been difficult ones to make. But with that said, and with this projection, do we need to start attacking with ideas this structural deficit? And does this committee play a role in that? I would say it does. So, I mean, each year we go through our budget, starting out in 1 month after we just approved the previous year. And each year we make decisions the best we can to balance the budget. So I think we need to start looking at what are some bigger things that we can do to help address this. And I don't know what that shape or form looks like, whether that we go into a workshop format. Do we have some of that work get done here in F&F first, and then we start to bring the full board in? I'm not sure what that looks like, but I think we need to start to have some of those discussions and figure out what approach we're going to want to take. And maybe, Pat, you can work with Darren on that, and Superintendent Siebert, and try and figure out, and Dr. Cook, and how do we go about doing this?
Yeah, we've actually.
Maybe I jumped ahead of the agenda asking for other business, but the idea popped into the head at that time.
The strike when iron's hot.
We have at the cabinet level just last week, we are discussing, even though we could have a rosy 21, 22, and I don't think that's going to hold. I can't believe the cash flow is going to hit the way it would have to hit to make this happen. But we started the conversation. I don't know if Dr. Siebert asked the question, or maybe it was Joe. Do we wait until 22, 23 when there's likely a funding cliff, or do we start identifying things now? And we are actually, we identified $2.5 to $3 million of reductions that we think we will have to make at some point. And maybe, when you get into those larger things, maybe some of those items you identify won't happen right away, but you're actually developing your multi-year plan of how you're going to address, a funding gap that we have in most declining, especially steadily declining school districts have. So we are working on that, and really that work began on, I guess it was Thursday, and identifying that. But I do think we have some large topics out there that we need to either identify as action items or things that are off limits, either or, a prioritization of what and who we are as a school district. So I do think there's a lot of work ahead of us. Our primary goal was to get through this year. I think as of January 11th, we've done that. So that's still our focus, is to get through this year, but come back with a plan for next year and the year after that. So.
Yeah, I just think it would be wise for us to tackle this sooner than later. And the types of things that we're looking to do should hopefully have repetitive savings year after year. Otherwise, you're not really addressing the structural deficit that we have. So, and the pressure is primarily due to less enrollment. Because each year we try again to become as efficient as we possibly can by balancing our budget, but we just have to have some bigger conversations around some topics that may have floated up throughout the course of the last decade or so, but float back down, and we've been taking it year by year. Now I think we need to because I don't want to come out 2 years from now and be looking that far down. I don't mind looking like that, but not like that. You get what I mean, I think.
And that's why we go through this practice every year, is to avoid that.
Yeah.
Chuck.
Thank you. I don't know if I can ask this or if this is the place, but it's F&F, so I will. So I wanted to ask, if we are having such a hard time finding subs, and since that's one of the criteria to close schools, if we're going to vote on that on Wednesday, is to, if we have a sub rate where we can't, a sub-fill rate where we can't fill enough, can we offer $20 more per day per sub? Where can we find some money to give an incentive to people who may or may not be on the fence about being a sub? And then I hear that, okay, we need to start looking at where to cut costs. Could we save money by the people who are virtual, instead of being virtual, just go into our eAchieve Academy? Is virtual the teacher that's teaching both in the classroom and virtual? I've heard it's quite a bear to do, but is that costing us money where we could put that into subs, or is that not one of the big expenses when you say we need to, what did I quote? We need to start looking at a more cost-efficient approach to instruction. Because we offer so many right now, and since we've had the argument of eAchieve and virtual being almost the same, but a label, how could we streamline that if that is costing us a lot? Is it, and is that a possibility? And could that money go to subs, is my question. Is this the place to ask that?
Well, we're speaking about the budget.
I think
so-
a lot of it falls under Sharon's purview, so I'll kind of defer to her on some of that question. But there's no doubt as you become more diverse in your instructional program, whether it's any of the specialty programs, and I think specialty programs is that's kind of our thing in my mind. So you have to weigh that and whether you think that's important or not. But what happens when eAchieve, face-to-face, and virtual are all running side by side, you further divide out the kids, and they don't leave in nice 25 groups of kids packets. So a classroom that maybe, let's say it was a 2-section second grade, 50 kids, right, 2 teachers. Well, if some of them went virtual, and you might end up with needing 3 teachers, and that's what we had. Now, is that tens of millions of dollars? No, and I'd have to sit down with Sharon. She has the numbers. Some of our section sizes just end up very small because you don't know what the parents are going to decide, and you have to make some assumptions as a district as to how to cover it. And we're going to be wrong. And some might have too big of sections. That's just the way it is when you have 12,000 kids in your school district. But it's not the most economically efficient approach to doing it. But again, when we made those calls, money wasn't the option. Getting through the school year was. So, but I do think we need to come back and revisit that and say how, because we might be facing this, as we all know. I'm not saying anything you don't know. We might be facing a very similar year. We don't know. So we need to find out, was that worth it, and can we sustain that financially if we do have to revert back to a hybrid or whatever you want to call it approach to instructional model.
Add too, though, that if we get that $4.2 million from the current CARES Act, I would assume that we would be able to put additional subbing costs to that, because we can currently put sub costs into the current CARE grant, additional sub costs needed because of COVID. The problem is, if FEMA doesn't come through, our CARES money for this year is gone. We've already spent it. If FEMA comes through, then we do have additional money to put to subs, but we can't make that decision today. But when we get the qualifications on that 4.2 million, it's certainly something we could look at as a source for funding that. But when we'll know that, I can't tell you
And that's
today.
the problem we're having with all these, is we're waiting for FEMA to show us what they're doing, so then we can react to it.
The 4.2, I would hope we would know before FEMA.
But if we need subs now, where in our budget can we do something to try to help that?
Would have to be a surplus thing that we would be taking out of our fund balance.
The easy answer is fund balancing. We'd have to guesstimate how much money we're even talking. I don't even know what the dollar value is off the top of my head. But, the board has the authority to set that pay scale and tell administration to come up with a plan. So that's really up to you. But I also know Sharon's had some conversations related to this, so I don't want to dive into that too much and maybe cross up something she's already said or thought she might have.
Mateo.
Along that point, if the board decides to pursue that, however that works, can we get numbers of how many subs we have, how many subs we think we need, and their rate of pay? To see at least if that's something the board's looking into, considering what exactly we're talking about. I don't know if that's the right way to ask for that, but something I thought of.
Yeah, we certainly can. We have enough history with COVID now where we can pull from our own experience to somewhat extrapolate out what the rest of the year is going to look like, I think with some degree of accuracy. And we certainly know who we're paying, so we know the subs we have. So that's, I think, two of the bigger parts of the puzzle you were asking about. In terms of how many we need, we've had some high COVID months. We've had some low COVID. So I would take an average and come up and again extrapolate out that average, and we should be able to get a feel for where those numbers are.
Start to quantify it a little bit.
Any other questions, comments? All right.
All right, now this is unlike normal years where it's kind of set in stone on how our funding is going to work. We could be coming back to you with a revised long-term projection as well, just to keep you up to pace on what we're seeing. So.
Alrighty, anything else on that? No? Next up is the monthly budget report.
I think I want to start first with the self-funded pages versus the budget report itself.
Okay.
So if you want to turn to your health claims payable document. As we've talked before, we carried over a bigger surplus this year, bigger than our IBNR because of COVID, expecting claims to start to jump at some point. And that just is not happening. Our surplus continues to increase. In December, it increased by another $500,000. And so the picture that's painting in my mind is that people are still holding off of doctor visits, anything that absolutely isn't necessary. I am still concerned that at some point that floodgate's going to open. It's just opening much later than I would have ever expected it to open. And so we will have to make decisions at the end of the year, though, because I doubt that we will be allowed to carry over such a big surplus again going into this next year. So the most logical thing that we'd want to do with it would be to put it into the health claims payable fund balance so that it's there when if and when those claims spike, and if it really never comes to fruition, we can look at using it later to help offset health insurance increases at a later point in time. But I'm just bringing that to your attention because I personally, at the end of December, am surprised at how much surplus we still do have and are adding to it, actually. We started out, at 3.8 million, and we're at over 5 million, which is just unheard of for December. Usually by this point, we're like, getting a little nervous about where it's going to end, and so that's just more FYI. We'll continue to watch that, but I think at the end of the year, there'll have to be some motions made to move that money into the fund balance or use it to offset next year's rates, but we'll have to be making some decisions with it. The dental, on the other hand, people are going back to the dentist, and we're starting to see a dip in the surplus for that. It went down about about 100,000 this last month, so people are starting to get back to the dentist. Whether that's regular things or things are going bad, I have no idea, but I'm happy to see that one's starting to head in the direction that we expected it to go. I guess not happy for the people that are going to the dentist, but I don't think it'll be a problem at the end of the year is my point with that one. Questions on those before we... And I'll jump into the monthly budget report. Overall, our revenues are the same thing every month that we've been experiencing with our student fees and rentals, our largest sources for local. Our interest is still running really low, even with our reduced budget. Our percentage is coming in pretty low on interest, but our tax levy money is going to start coming in this week, and the bank accounts will be bigger for quite a while, thus earning a little more interest. So I think by the end of the year, we'll make our target, but we're only at a quarter of our target right now, which is pretty low for the end of December. Overall, we receive grant payments and things, but nothing out of the ordinary. We're at 14.96 of our budgeted revenues compared to 15.9, but I'm not worried. Everything we're looking at is still that the revenue's coming. It's just a matter of timing. Some of the grants were delayed in getting their budgets approved, and so the grant claims are a little lagging behind, but I do expect to make up on the revenue side. On the expense side, the main thing I want to talk about are salaries and benefits. We paid all of our retro pay in December and had all the contracts adjusted for the pay increase. And every month we do salary projections that we look at, are we still in target with where we expect to be? And with all these increases, our salary projections are holding. And so that's looking good, that we should be coming in budget really close to where we expect to be even after those are added. Purchase services, mainly personal services, facilities, just a lot of smaller projects, not anything really big, just our normal event workers and things like that. Non-capital, similar to this is kind of our big unknown area. This is the one where if we're going to go over, this is the area I would expect most to go over with the supplies and things like that. We'll have a better idea. I think in March, we'll be looking at coming back with potential budget amendments if needed. We'll have a much better idea, but this category is starting to slow down, and we are still within budget, so might not come out as bad as we had anticipated, but March we'll have a better picture for you. Capital objects, minimal spending. There was a $19,000 vehicle purchase, it looked like, but it was actually a $36,000 purchase for some used snow equipment from the city, and we just, that was offset with some sales of equipment that we no longer needed. No debt retirement for out of Fund 10, no insurance or judgments. So basically right now we're at 30.64% of our budget, and last year we were at 31.51. So it's holding pretty steady with where we expect our expenses in the general fund to be. Fund 27 is pretty much the same picture I paint every month. Our only revenue was our second categorical aid and some grant money. Same comments for the Fund 27, the special education salary and benefits, same position we're in the general fund, so it's a really good outlook there. And minimal spending in all the other categories. So Fund 43, interest, we had a CD mature. We're just really lucky that we locked into some of the rates that we did before everything took a tank. So we're still yielding some very good interest on CDs that are maturing for our Fund 43 projects. Expenditures, we had $2.3 million in December, mainly payments to contractors for all the construction projects that are in motion. Questions?
Nope.
My report.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sherry. Alrighty, so next up is other business. Is there any recommendation for future committee meetings?
Just the one I made
okay.
earlier.
Okay.
You heard it.
Yep, definitely. Mrs. Voigt?
I did have, before Ms. Franchek brought it up, the idea of the sub incentives that might be necessary to take care of that sub-fill rate situation. So I definitely concur that that's something that we do need to have as a point that we look at.
Okay, for sure.
We talked about it a couple months ago, and I think it's something that needs to still be addressed.
Anything else?
Would you like that to come back to HR or? Would you like that to come back here to F&F or HR, both, just so?
Probably both. What do you think? Yeah.
Okay.
two pieces to it,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, I'll talk to Sharon tomorrow then.
yeah.
Sometimes topics just spread
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
multiple
they overlap.
committees, so,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Okay. Anything else? One we had in a long time. All righty. So we do have need for a closed session. Hasn't ended. It's back. Okay. All right, we're looking for a motion to go into closed session. Montiel.
I'll move to adjourn to executive session pursuant to WISTAT 19.85 sub 1 sub E for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Oakdale Tax Keys, WAKC 1360198, WAKC 13770020002, and WAKC 1377003.
Is there a second? Mrs. Voigt seconds?
I second it. A much easier part than Mr. Montiel.
Do we have a roll call vote?
Aye?
Aye.
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 Aye.